Hello, folks. My name's DC Rockwell, and this is your co-host, Elio Greco. Welcome to Code and Chaos, a pseudo-random conversation that starts with tech and ends where it ends, an hour or two later. Tonight's conversation is brought to you by our subscribers and by egx.org. Elio, we are talking about a day in what I would imagine to be
hopefully an
ideal
future.
Life for you. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully not the distant future, hopefully the near future, but I don't know, man. It's been a good 4 to 5 decades and we still don't really have much of this stuff, so we'll see.
So in the last episode, we talked all about digital identity and personal personal information management, and we talked a lot about a high level overview of what all of that is. But we said that it might be cool to talk about what would it be like to live a day in that life where this technology of digital identity and web of trust and things like that are already implemented. Because when we talk, off the air on the phone, we go back and forth a lot about whether or how long are we going to have to really wait for this stuff to be implemented. And, I think it's a really long time, but after conversations today with Samantha Sims, I have a little bit more, optimism when it comes to this, because she showed how things have been progressing in the right direction since, at least for the last 30 years. And so what I would like to talk about today is that day in that life. What is it actually going to be like? Because I think if people could see how life improves with these systems in place, then they might be more they might be more on board with the idea of talking about it with other people, and especially if they ever got an opportunity to talk to a representative, they might be able to articulate to them why, these kinds of systems are important to them. So do we have a name for our person that we want to make up here? Or do we have a?
I mean, it's based on cryptography, so I kind of feel like maybe Alice, because traditionally there's 3 people in cryptography. There's Alice, Bob, and Eve. Is always, every time you hear an example, Alice and Bob are just trying to do good things, just get their stuff done. And Eve is, of course, the eavesdropper who's always trying to mess it up and get in there where she's not supposed to be. So,
okay. So then Alice, how does her day start, Elio?
Well, for one thing, one of the great things about if you truly had decentralized identity, everyone hates passwords. Everyone hates logging in because it's awful. And if you really had decentralized identity, that would just go away. So that's worth keeping in mind throughout everything we talk about. There's no more login. Now, there is still unlocking your phone. You still want to have some way to unlock your phone, whether biometrics are, we can get in that in another show, but biometrics aren't great they're good for facilities, not great for devices. So if you're relatively nonchalant, maybe biometrics. If you're a little more security conscious, maybe a password. But the good news is it would be a single password that you wouldn't have to change every month. You could keep it for a long time and you'd be good to go. And if you're really, really security conscious, it'd probably be both. It'd probably be biometrics, fingerprint, face scan, voice print, password. It would be multi-factor even for your local device, but that actually could be pretty convenient. You could go ahead and, you could put your finger on the reader, point the phone at your face, and, it could take at least 3 biometrics at the exact same time. So anyway, so you still would have that. Yeah.
So basically Alice is going to wake up and she's going to, instead of she's going to pick up her phone, right? Because her alarm's going off, and there's going to be some sort of way of unlocking her phone. So that's still going to be a part of her day. And then let's say she gets dressed for the day. She's got to go to work, and so she goes out to her car. Is there anything that decentralized identity could do at her car?
So if we actually had a good protocol, instead of carrying a key fob, a lot of people have gone to wireless little key fobs anyway. And the problem is some of those, if you just have a transmitter that can boost that signal, there have been cases where people, while they're in a restaurant, someone near the car and someone in the restaurant, they have a transmitter that'll take that frequency that it's transmitting on from their purse, for instance, or their pocket, and retransmit that on another frequency and then retransmit it on the original frequency. And you just open the door. You don't actually need the key. You just need the radio signal. And you just open the door, take what you want, maybe drive away, start the car. So that's something where if we had, the other thing that's worth mentioning before we go further is if you're going to do this and have real decentralized identity, you're going to want something called the Trusted Computing Base, or TCB. And that means your phone ideally is made of open source hardware. Maybe it's running a RISC-V processor, which is an open processor architecture, and it's running an open source, not Android. Android is open source-esque. There's a huge asterisk hanging after that. So technically the code is open source, but it goes badly from there. We'll leave that alone for this episode. So you'd want a device that you could trust all the way down to the hardware, where you know that the device is pretty tamper-proof, pretty secure, and working solely on your behalf. So we're going to assume that exists, and that's also a thing. So yeah, you unlock your device. You go to get in the car. Now, I would say as an added level of security, the attack I just described, where you boost the signal and you just jump in the car because it thinks the key is nearby, even though it's not nearby, I would say it's probably smart to have some kind of notification. If you have a little smartwatch, have it put a little thing up saying, hey, someone's trying to get into your car. Would you like that to happen? And that way you can go ahead and say, yeah, go ahead and allow that. And that way, even if someone, maybe the kids are ahead of you in the parking lot and they're trying to get into the car, and you can just be like, yeah, open the car. They'll let them in. And that way, if it's someone trying to pull off the attack that I mentioned, they can't, because they would have to also tap your watch in order to actually send the signal that would allow the car to open. It wouldn't be enough to just, have a certain radio signal near. It would have to actually, be an affirmative, yes, I am here. The other technology that, again, while we're speculating, there was really cool technology. I've seen this research kind of pop up above and below the radar, but using someone's skin, very, very, very low frequency currents. And for those afraid of electricity, those bathroom scales that have the little metal things, they can tell you your body fat and all that, like that level of current where you don't even feel it. But there was actually research where if you have, say, a watch on, it can send signals instead of RF. It can actually send signals through your skin. So if you have a watch, and even with your other hand, if you go grab the door handle of a car, and it also has electrodes that can pick the signal up, there's no RF transmission. You can go ahead, and the car, as soon as you touch the car, the watch and the car can do a little talking with each other and say, hey, are you the right watch? Are you the right car? Oh, you are. Excellent. So let's go ahead and open. And then that way that can't be intercepted from a distance. So we could have not just what we have today, which is a keyless future where you don't actually have to put a key in and turn it to open the car, but we could have a much more secure future where you just open the door and it's just totally transparent, and just get in the car. And because of skin contact, it does this cryptographic key exchange via skin contact, and you don't have to worry about RF snooping and retransmission attacks. So that could be really neat. That would be really convenient and far more secure than what we have today.
Okay, so in fewer words, they walk up to the car, and their identity is then sent to the car. The car then sends a notification back to their... So just by walking up to the car, being in a certain proximity of it, it sends your identity to this car. This car is strictly tied to your identity and the other people's identities that you want to allow access to the car, and it sends your watch a notification, and you say, yes, open. And
to dramatically oversimplify, but give a little technical detail, you walk up to the car and your watch asks the car, hey, or actually, I guess the car could ask your watch either way, hey, I'd like you to open the door, and the car says, hey, okay, what's our secret number plus 5? And these are way bigger numbers, but we're using tiny numbers, and your secret number is 7. And
Well,
so 7 plus 5.
That
Right?
seems more complicated than
This
how it
is what's
currently
happening.
works.
You don't even know. And these are really huge
Oh, I see.
numbers. And so this is the conversation the car and the watch are having like instantaneously. And because the numbers are actually enormous and you're doing actual cryptography, it's not something you can just guess and you can just walk up and try and guess. I'm just vastly oversimplifying the process. So it's a challenge response. And
so it's not like the current tech where it would actually like put a notification on my phone and I have to reach down and touch my phone or my watch and say, yes, open the door. I'm walking right up to the car and the car's just opening up.
I would only want that functionality if, like I said, the skin conduction, where it's actually sending it through your skin, so you can't do the RF. I still would want it to ask me.
Well, no. The point would be is that I'm walking towards the car. Mm-hmm. My watch sends a signal to the car and says, "Hey, I would like to." Oh, I see what you're saying. So. So when I send it to the car, someone else
driving away because here's the radio signal from farther than it thinks.
Well, what I meant was, I see what you're saying is that I would send my identity to the car, or the car would send something to me, and I would know that special number, and then I'd send it back to the car. But they could pick up on the transmission of sending it back to the car for verification and replay it. Yeah, is that what we're talking about?
Replay is a problem. The other thing, there's other ways actually now that I'm really thinking about it while you're describing, where you could do some much more complex stuff and you could actually have each device listen to what other devices are around it and try to correlate where it is, or do GPS stuff and double check and make sure you're actually like close enough. So there are ways where you could, I guess, make it very convenient where, like you said, you just walk up, just open the car, just don't worry about it with RF. The problem is you definitely don't want to allow replay attacks, which is relatively easy to prevent, where someone just captures that radio signal and then plays it back again later, and that opens your car. You want a signal that's unique every time your car and your watch do this little dance. It should be a brand new sequence, so it can't be reused later. And there's a ton of ways to do that. Okay. So anyway.
But currently, the way... very... Yeah. The way some of these systems work, like OnStar, for example, is you're like, hey, I want you to unlock my car. And you have to send a request to some centralized server. And then that centralized server then sends a signal to your car. And anything along those ways could be compromised. And, somebody could actually, could be listening in or find a vulnerability in OnStar or something like that, right?
The good and the bad. The problem with OnStar is OnStar right now, if you have that on your car, it's very nice. It's very convenient. If you get locked out of your car, they can let you in. They can remote start and all that. But the problem is they can do that. You don't have to be in the loop. They always have the ability. We talked in the last episode about the sketchy ADT security guy who was snooping on people via the cameras they have.
Right.
And that's the problem with something like OnStar. So ideally what we'd want, if we had decentralized identity, is we would want OnStar to have to ask for our permission. And watch, phone, whatever, one of our identity providing devices, we'd want OnStar to have to send a thing to us to basically ask for that special challenge, basically, or relay the challenge from the car. And then we could say, yeah, go ahead. Okay, phone. OnStar wants, I do want the car open right now. And you'd have to hit a little thing on your phone saying, yeah, go ahead and let OnStar open the car. Go ahead and let OnStar, So again, if you weren't near the car and let's say you're shopping and maybe, a friend of yours is helping you pick up something heavy. And so they go to get the car and you're sitting with the thing you bought. This would be cool because unlike an example with like your spouse, you're both going to have access to the car. But if it's a friend of yours, you could actually allow temporary access. You could kind of give day passes where you would temporarily authorize another device access to like your car. So anyway, there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do when you have more control over your own identity.
Right. So we get into the car, and whether they have their device set up so this way they don't need the added security of, having to, do anything with their devices. Let's just say Alice has it set up so this way she can walk right up to the car and just opens right up and it starts up, right? So she's in her car, she's driving to work, and she's like, you know what? I'm feeling like I'm dragging a bit. I'm going to stop and get a coffee. So this gives her an opportunity or it gives us an opportunity to talk about what is it like to pay for goods or services. So, like for a good, like a cup of coffee, what's actually happening here, and like what does it look like? She walks in. Presumably, there's a touch screen since this is the future, and there's nobody standing behind the. No, I'm just kidding. There might be somebody. A barista takes the order, whether that's a touch screen barista or that's a person. And how does she pay for that? How does that actually look?
So this actually I think would look very similar to what we have now. You know, a lot of these new Apple Pay, Android Pay, whatever, all the wireless ones where you just kind of hold your phone to the reader and it does a little exchange. Like some of this is similar, except the problem right now is you're not entirely in the exchange. There's all this other stuff happening and you have very little agency in it. And interestingly, what some of these institutions are doing now is they are popping up a little thing to prevent fraud where you do the thing and then you have to hit, yes, I actually intend to make this payment. So what I would love to see is same kind of flow, wave it over there, hit the button, but then also have a receipt generated on our device. And you have the cryptographic identities of the store, of the payment provider, of your bank, Visa, whatever it is, and then of you, all basically agreeing to this. Yes, I intend to buy a coffee, and the store is saying the coffee costs this much, and you're saying, great, I will pay this many dollars for a coffee, and go ahead and transfer the funds. Financial institution, and they say, okay, your account is in good standing, you have enough in there, we'll go ahead and transfer those funds. And then the coffee shop saying, we received the funds, we acknowledge it, you're going to get your coffee. Basically, this whole little exchange happens cryptographically, and then you get a record. And so instead of collecting all these receipts, I mean, this would be brilliant. A fully distributed system, you could actually have it automatically collect all the receipts. And then you could use the data if you had the direct access to it like this. You could have an auto tag by what time of the day, what else is on the calendar, what part of the city. Like you could actually have a lot of the stuff you got to do for taxes could be just almost effortless and also much more private. You would still have to decide that you wanted to actually send this to the government and claim it as an exemption on your taxes for, business write-offs. But you wouldn't have to dig through all the stuff. And then when they received it, because it's cryptographically assured to all the parties, they know it's not made up. They know this is an actual expense that was incurred.
But this doesn't sound decentralized to me. So because there's still a financial institution involved here. And I was thinking of something more along the lines of my phone holds some credits on it, right? And I can transfer them directly from me to the company, right?
We can get into the cryptocurrency space. I think we should save that for another show. There's a lot of issues with bandwidth and throughput. And as we have seen, there have been several excellent articles when cryptocurrency was on that latest shot to the moon. Now it's fallen back down a bit, as usual. So there were people that have lost passwords to wallets and lost 200 to 300 million. So there are advantages to not making this fully decentralized, cryptocurrency wise, and to just having this decentralized receipt where you have this agreement, and that gives you a lot of the benefits. And you can still dispute that later, and you have the evidence now if you need to. So we can go into details some other time, but yeah, that's a whole other discussion.
So then, I guess, what's the advantage of paying for goods or services in this? How is it decentralized in the first place? Because this doesn't sound decentralized. And how is this in any way different than what we are doing now?
Without going into the underlying tech, it would be hard to explain. So then this is the thing. Some stuff will feel just different
in simple terms that everybody's going to understand. What's different about it?
So this is the digital equivalent of a paper receipt, where instead of storing this on some server somewhere, you are asking servers to do one little part here or there, and you're writing a digital version of a paper receipt. And this could be implemented in a single document, or ideally something a little more flexible, like a Merkle DAG, that can be synchronized between the different devices. And so devices that want to retain this for their records for some period of time can do that. And you're synchronizing it between all the parties. So Visa or your bank has a copy, the coffee shop has a copy, and you have a copy. These are independent copies that are separate. But because of the cryptographic identities of each one, you definitely know it's a legit thing that came from these other parties, that they signed it mathematically, and it's as good as if it was sitting on their server.
Okay.
But it can be purged from their server, and you can keep a record as long as you want for any of the parties.
Okay, but so for example, let's just say that after Alice got some coffee, she went and she realized that she didn't have as much gas in her car as she thought she did. Or maybe it's an electric car. She needed to get a quick charge, and in the future, it's just driving up and you get a quick charge, whatever. But she needs some fuel for the some power for the car. So she goes to the local gas or electric station, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that the days of there being fraudulent, like card readers or fraudulent, some sort of like maybe a fraudulent Apple Pay reader or something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
So skimmers would be a lot easier to defeat with something like this.
Right.
Because again, you can now, if you have, like we talked about last time, this decentralized identity system, you can have these different points kind of registered with each other. So the coffee shop and Visa, they do business with each other all the time, right? There's a lot of people that pay with the Visa, for instance. And so there's this cross signing of keys. So when you go to pay, if some other little device, like a little fraudulent skimmer, I guess we shouldn't use the coffee shop example. Let's use a gas station. So if this is your gas station, people tend to kind of go to one gas station more than others. Then your device can kind of get used to, oh, this is the legit payment info for this gas station. If some little skimmer tries to jump in there, it can alert you that, whoa, wait a minute, this is not, the net math doesn't work out. This is not the right thing. You think you're talking to the gas station. This is not the gas station. Last time we bought something here, it had this ID, and suddenly there's a different ID. This looks super sketchy. Like, let's make sure we're talking to the right entity, which is something you can't really do right now.
So I would have thought that maybe like the gas station has an ID, but the actual card reader has its own ID. And if the card reader is not associated with the gas station's ID, then now you know there's a skimmer, right? You know that this isn't actually going where I thought it was going.
I'm trying to keep it simple, but you'd have a whole tree, like a whole hierarchy. So yes, every pump would have its own ID that was endorsed by the gas station itself, which might be endorsed by corporate as well.
Okay, so then Alice goes there. She tries to use it on this pump, and she goes, "Oh man, this is my phone or my watch or something is telling my smart glasses are telling me that this is not a legitimate pump. This pump has been compromised. It has a skimmer on it." So she goes, "You know what? Actually, I guess the real scenario here would be that there's just no skimmer, because skimmers just don't make economic sense in this future, because it's so easy to tell that a skimmer on the pump, which is going to try and take my financial information, is not associated with the same ID as the actual gas station, which is well published and well, accessible through what would presumably be a very high-speed mesh network that is covering the whole city." So,
but this is the thing. You don't even need the connectivity. See, everyone's so used to thinking we need 5G and 6G, whatever that's going to be. But I've already seen people talking about 6G. We're not even done with the 5G rollout. We're not even halfway through. Stop it. But you could have nice thing is you don't need a blockchain. You don't need all this connectivity. If you have these keys, again, once you validated one time, that key is the valid key. It's the actual legit key for the station. After that, you cache that key. It's only a few kilobytes of data. So it takes up, on a modern phone, that's basically nothing. That's a few text messages tops. So you don't even need the internet anymore. You can validate any of the pumps that say they're, legit. You can do the math and check if they are without actually having to do any of those shenanigans. Now, the one problem you could have is, what if there's an insider threat? What if someone pays off a gas station attendant to put in another little reader illegitimately? But again, there are ways to defeat that as well. So you're right. It becomes very, very hard to do skimming, because the reason skimming happens is there is no end-to-end authentication. They have the little chips, but it's relatively weak. And so there's no way to validate this whole chain of transactions and make sure all three parties, Alice's phone, Bob's gas station, and, the bank, Visa, whoever, to validate that those three parties are actually saying, yes, I want to transfer these funds versus Alice's phone, Eve's skimmer, and Visa. So
Okay.
now you can do that. And the great thing about this is when I say you can do that, your device can do that. All of this can be basically transparent. The worst case scenario, if the device couldn't figure out if it's a gas station you haven't been to before, so it doesn't already know who it should be talking to, it might pop up a warning and say, this looks kind of sketchy. Like, I wasn't able to validate this identity with the Better Business Bureau, with the local state, tax authority, et cetera. Like, this doesn't seem like a legitimate payment portal. Are you sure you want to transfer these funds?
Okay. So Alice, in this case, Alice gets the fuel she needs for the car because there are no skimmers, because it just doesn't make a lot of economic sense. There's too many ways to get caught that way. There's a lot of probably all kinds of other types of crime we could talk about in this future that don't have to do with this stuff. But anything having to do with identity and anything having to do with trying to pass yourself off as a different identity than you actually are, whether that is an individual or that's a business or that's a particular identity of a particular gas pump, that becomes super difficult to pull off, and therefore it's just not economically reasonable for a criminal to take it.
It's the equivalent of if you go in and pay inside and you meet the same clerk, week after week, who you're supposed to be paying for gas. Gotcha. You see someone new behind the counter, you're like, wait, who are you? Right? So it's the allowing electronic devices to do the same thing.
Cool. So Alice gets the fuel. She drives to work, parks her car. Let's just say there was a gate or something like that at her office building, and it just knows who she is as she's driving up, and she drives right through, right? And she gets to, once she parks, the building automatically just knows where she's parked. So if at the end of the day she can't remember where she parked, the building can just tell her where she's parked because it's strongly tied to her identity, her car. She gets up to the office, and it turns out that this is the day that there's a new team member that's joining her team, right? And she wants to, and she knows that this new team member is going to need a warm greeting, So let's say that she wants to take this team member out to lunch. She gets up there, and one of the first things she does is she checks her email. She doesn't have to log in, right? Because it automatically knows what her identity is. Yeah. And then she gets into her email. She sees that this member is definitely showing up today. And she starts to search for a restaurant on the internet, right? So she wants a restaurant that's highly rated. How does this work in this future society?
Well, the neat thing is when you have strong identity, right now, and we talked a little bit about this last time, but we'll go over it again. Right now, you just see ratings. And if you see ratings on Amazon, on Yelp, on choose any website that has ratings, the only thing you have to work with, you don't actually know who any of those people are. I mean, even if you recognize the names, like maybe it's them, but you don't actually know. You're trusting the site to hopefully not have a name collision. And anyway, you don't know. So, and most of the people, even if you do know a few, it's not going to bump them to the top. You're just going to see the aggregate rating, because all you can really do is say, well, this restaurant has a good ratings, but there's only 5 people. So maybe those are just the 5 friends of the restaurant owner that rated it highly. So maybe it's not really that good. This other one is only rated like 4.2 stars instead of 4.9. But, there's like 100, several hundred, several thousand people, depending on like this. Oh, wow, this has like 300 ratings. It's probably okay. This has 1,000 plus. So probably it's not feasible for 1,000 people for this restaurant to get 1,000 people to all go on there and rate it, in a way that doesn't actually reflect what the general public thinks of it. But you have several problems here. One is like, it's the general public, not who you care about. And we'll come back to that. And the other one is we've seen actually several cases. There was a really interesting one just last year, at the end of last year, where the game is getting, at least in other countries, they're up in their game. So here we've had people rate restaurants badly and then get sued because most people do not have several $1,000s to hire a lawyer and be like, I'm not taking my bad rating for your crappy restaurant down. Like, most people get sued and they're like, wait, how much is that going to cost? And they're like, look, all you got to do is take the bad review down. We'll drop the lawsuit. And most people are just like, all right, fine. So you have businesses that are willing to be unethical can just go ahead and threaten lawsuits left and right and basically game the ratings and purge all the low ratings. Even if they're terrible businesses, they can purge some of those if they're willing to play dirty enough. So that's a problem. You have rating inflation. You can buy also high ratings. There are whole groups you can go to on not even the dark web and just say, hey, I want to buy like 100 good ratings. And people will with fake, and they're starting to get more sophisticated where they build up accounts. So it's hard to tell that they're fake. But then going back to what I said before, what if Alice is being particularly, not only what do her friends think of the restaurant? What is it actually, is it going to be good for her? But maybe she actually, at the office, she connects her phone with this other person's phone, QR code, NFC, whatever. And now, again, she's validated that the keys, that person is actually that person. So when she texts them later, or emails them later, or calls them later, she knows it's definitely that person or one of the devices that's under their control. That's part of their identity digitally. So now she can see if there's any connections between her and that person in the web of trust. And she can actually filter the people this person knows and seems to trust. What do they think of the restaurants around here? Are there anyone they have as mutual acquaintances that can actually say this restaurant is really good, they'll like going here? So this is all stuff you don't have that information. Once you start to actually know who people are and how they're related to you and other people, you can start doing really interesting things, and ratings become much harder to game and much, much more useful when you have decentralized identity.
Gotcha. So we're able to actually trust the ratings that we see on here because we know that our phone or whatever it is, or the web browser, or these websites are able to filter out the bot ratings, and they're able to filter out folks who may not have very much, or rather we could set a filter on it and say only give me ratings from people who are highly trusted for giving good ratings.
You can take it even further and really customize if you wanted to. And I have friends that are, they know good food. And if they say you should go to this restaurant, I'm like, which restaurant? Let's go. And I have family members that think Olive Garden is food. So, they have that. Everyone has their flaws. They have that logical fallacy. It's not actual food. So, when you have an internal report saying the food is bland and unappealing, that's your internal report. You got a problem. So those people, you could actually apply kind of a multiplier to people's ratings. And so maybe normal people you don't know, just get a 1x multiplier, whatever they rated it counts for that many stars times 1. And then people that are really up on their food and really, they know all those secret places that have like the best late night tacos or just really high end restaurants. You can maybe give them a 5, 10x, 20x, whatever number you feel is appropriate, so that their rating, when they rate it, 5 stars, it's actually like 50 stars worth. So their ratings really push it over because that's who you care about. And then those people that that they have no taste, or some people where they have great taste, it's just like, I don't like what they like. Like, we're on opposite ends of this spectrum. You can actually put a negative rating on there. And so whatever they rate it, it actually inverts the rating and then multiplies by a certain amount. So if they love the place, you're like, if they love it, I know I'm going to hate that place. So just... Nope. So you could start getting much more useful rating information, and you could teach your phone this stuff, and then it can be applied in various areas, because you're going to have different multipliers for food versus electronics versus movies versus all this. But the phone can do a lot of this automatically. So as you teach it and train it, like, it can get a lot smarter, and you're not doing this in the cloud. It's not being collected and monetized against you. This is just happening on your local device. This is just annotations in your little local trust web. So over time, it gets better and better and better at rating stuff and actually showing you stuff, not whoever paid Google the most or Yelp or TripAdvisor or whatever. Right now, whoever pays the most basically gets to shove their stuff in the front of the most eyeballs. That's how that business works. And so what this allows you to do is have algorithmic sovereignty where you get to control the discovery algorithm. So your algorithm, your phone is now showing you what you would like, not what some other entity that's paid more would like, but what you actually would like more based on people you actually know and trust. And you can fine tune it over time. So
this sounds awesome. It also seems like a good system for music as well. Like
totally.
There are plenty of people I'd be giving negative ratings to. No offense, everybody. I know. So, all right. So Alice finds the restaurant and she books it through the site, and it goes through the same sort of the same sort of I'm presuming that she can send her own booking directly to this restaurant. Doesn't have to go through some sort of restaurant booking service or anything like that. She can just say, hey, restaurant, I personally would like to do this.
If we really go all the way with the decentralized stuff and we actually have plenty of protocols, yeah, we could totally have a scheduling or reservation protocol where her phone could just reach out. It could already do the searching and say, oh, based on how much time you have to, drive or walk over to this restaurant, based on the ratings that are mutually shared connections, we think this new person's going to enjoy this restaurant more than this other one. And it could say, okay, and then our lunch window is here. So based on all the criteria we've taught our phone, then, and this could be, again, we're not talking like normal programming. We're talking like mild machine learning, where over time it's like, hey, I think you'd like this. And you're like,
or even better,
okay, right?
Maybe even better. Like maybe in the morning, she opens her email and she quickly shoots an email over to the new person, greets them to the team, says, hey, send me over your food preferences. I'm going to pick a nice restaurant for us. And then those food preferences were automatically factored into the ratings of both Alice's food preferences and this new hire. What was the second name we used? Not Eve, but
Bob is usually
Bob. Okay, so Alice and Bob's food preferences are both sort of merged together, and then on top of that, both of their rating systems are at their web of trust restaurant rating systems are put together, and then it basically shows them the perfect restaurants that are within the walking distance that they're both going to find something on that menu that they like.
Yeah. And so all the stuff right now, everything we're talking about, this way back in at least the 80s fell under the term personal digital assistant. Before the Palm Pilot, before all those little things.
We saw them on like Computer Chronicles, like in the 80s. This was not a new this is not a new idea.
So we were dreaming that someday we'd have these little pocket computers that were powerful, and like the stuff we were dreaming of was like 1,000th, if that, as powerful as these things actually are now. And it was just going to do all this stuff and kind of learn our preferences, and it'd all be happening right in our pocket. It wouldn't be going out to the cloud for some other person, or entity to monetize. And yeah, you wouldn't have to think about it. Your phone would be like, okay, you stayed up too late the night before, you got up late, you're really you're dragging today. So I'm going to, adjust your alarm to wake you up just a little earlier, because it's going to take you an extra 10 minutes to get going today. And like once customizing stuff to people, if it happens locally on a trusted device, is a beautiful thing. Where it went sideways is we shoved everything in the cloud and we made it all about how can we monetize this customization for other parties' gain. But if you bring it back into your device, it's awesome. You could literally have it figure stuff out and just ask you occasional questions. And it could be like, yeah, no, I already booked your favorite restaurant based on, you haven't had this in a week or two, so I know you're craving it now. You have enough time. The commute is fine. I checked the traffic, checked the weather, and it could do all this. And you're just like, oh, cool. We're having lunch. We're having sushi today. Awesome. Nice. And just you spend the rest of that brain power for better stuff. It's infuriating we don't actually have this because it's not a new idea. It's decades old. It's about time.
Well, Alice gets to enjoy it at least right now.
Wish I were fictional sometimes.
Yeah. Wow, that's a sad true statement, isn't it? So they book the restaurant and she starts doing her work. Normal stuff like being able to log into websites without a login and password. Her device just sends her identity over there. The website goes, "Yep, I know who you are." And so there are still other services that are out there, but now you directly connect to them, and there's no centralized authority systems that try to keep a big database of users and their passwords and stuff like that can be cracked. There's just there's still data out there, but the data is it's your login credentials and how to access your account. They're not all centrally stored. It's that you send your account information over to them, and it goes, "Oh, it looks like it's Alice. Let's let her in," right?
Yeah.
So
if you want to take 5 minutes on that, that's a more extreme version of right now. We do all this logging in just like we used to with these huge mainframes when they were the size of a tennis court. But honestly, what we should be doing is synchronizing data, making sure we're both looking at the same thing, because data is copied all the time. So we might as well take advantage of that and both have a separate copy. And there are easy ways to do this. And so you would never log in, ideally, with decentralized identity. You'd make a request to some service and you'd say, "Hey, I'm starting this new little conversation, this little ball of data. Show me what you got. If it's products." Yeah, you want to pull up the meme?
Show me what you got.
Yeah. So you could say, show me what the options are for this product, show me what the options are for this restaurant, etc. If you wanted to use some kind of recommendation service, I guess mostly for products, and you'd get a whole bunch of offers. And then you could decide, or your device could decide if you want to delegate that and say, okay, this seems like the best option. And then you could send another offer just to that one service and say, okay, I would like to, buy one of those, or I would like to use that service. And you could kind of do a little negotiation. Your devices could handle all this. And then if everything's acceptable, your device is like, "Hey, here's the rate. Are you willing to pay this?" And you're like, "Yeah, go ahead and send the money." And now you're not logging into anything. You're starting kind of a negotiation, and you have a record of what happened, which makes billing and tracking and all the tax fun stuff you got to do for business a lot easier. So yeah, I think it's time to get away from login, and then we're not putting it all in a pile in one place where it can be breached and now everyone gets to see everything. Now you have these little synchronized things that are just here and there, and just getting all of those becomes really onerous. It becomes way too much work for an adversary to try to scrape up and actually break the encryption on all these separate conversations. So,
Right.
It's the difference between keeping, and we covered this in our article on egx.org. We did a whole 3-part series, and we talk about putting all your money in the bank is great because the bank can have really, good defenses. But if someone robs the bank, man, there sure is, if you rob the bank, you get everyone's money. If you go house to house and try to see what's under the mattress, it's really risky. You're probably not going to get very much unless you find like the one guy that doesn't trust banks. And it's too much risk. Even if everyone didn't use the bank, you're risking getting caught every single time and getting a lot less. There's lower payout, higher risk.
Right.
And so we should be building computer systems the same way, where instead of putting all the juicy data in one database where you breach one system and it's totally worth the risk because you get everything as soon as you breach it, spread it out. So the work of getting all the data becomes just too much work to make it worth your while.
All right. Well, she logs into some websites but doesn't log in. She shares her identity and some user information with this website, and she starts doing her work. At some point, she gets a message from her partner. How do you get a message in the future? Like, say it's a text message, and the text message says, "Hey, I need some money for this particular thing. Can you send me some money for groceries," or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So her partner sends this text, presumably from their phone, how does Alice get this message? How does it actually transfer? In a we understand it'll be encrypted, and we don't have to go
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
encryption. But
yeah.
how does it actually send?
Well, the big difference with the encryption is it's true end to end. We talked about that last episode. So only Alice and Bob have keys, and if they're using a service to relay it or whatever nodes they're using to relay the message, they don't have a copy. They don't have a way in to read the message, so it's nice and private. And everyone's like, oh, don't email passwords, because there's a lot of other parties that can read even in encrypted emails. Unless you're talking PGP, your mail provider can dig through and read passwords, and if there's a breach, well, there goes your password. So it's a bad idea to email passwords. So one of the awesome things, assuming you still actually need passwords, because again, decentralized identity, but whatever sensitive information you need to send, password or even more sensitive, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about that getting intercepted or getting, dug through by the provider. It's truly end to end with limited key distribution. So you can send whatever you want, never worry about it getting intercepted.
How's it sent, though?
As far as sending it, I mean, you can make it look the way it is now, and you can use a lot of the same infrastructure and just encrypt on top of that. I'm a big fan of, again, not having these little discrete messages and doing kind of what we were talking about, where you start a conversation and have like a little bucket, a little place where you can put all kinds of stuff that's related to. So if you're planning a surprise party, for instance, you can start a conversation about that, and you can put, if it's a surprise, maybe that's not as good, because that's probably going to be somewhere the person already goes. But let's say you're planning a kid's birthday party. You can put some ideas. You want to put it at the train park? Do you want to put it at the zoo? Do you want to put it like where are all the places we might have it? You can put in, theme ideas. You can put in whatever you want, like all the stuff you're thinking of doing. You can put that in and put it in one place for mom, dad, grandma, aunts, uncles, whoever. And it's all collected in one place. And instead of the stuff you see today with emails all over the place, and you can kind of thread them, sort of, but not really. You can put all the stuff, whether it's locations on a map, whether it's ideas for stuff, whether it's pictures of like potential, they want this. If you start grouping data, so it's a lot more useful.
It's a bucket of messages, and we can put messages whatever we want it. But how is it sent? Like what does Alice's partner's phone do, and how is this conversation sent? Across the internet, or like it goes across? Is it that Alice's partner's phone calls some sort of like directory and says, I want the IP address of this particular identity, and like a DNS server sort of thing?
Yeah, you could do stuff like that. I mean, without going into the technical details, you could send it however you want. There's a cool project called i3M that tries to use LoRaWAN, that tries to use Wi-Fi, that tries to use satellite, that basically however it can talk, it tries to find some way of getting a message across for like ultra high reliability, like find a channel. There's lots of different channels. If one goes down, there's like 5 other ways to get the message through. So that's something that we could do, because now once the encryption is truly end to end, we don't really care who handles a copy of the message on the way from Alice to Bob. It doesn't matter. With strong encryption, the risk of someone actually getting the message decrypted, we don't care. We do care about reliability. So we can send it several different ways, and then we can dedupe and throw away the ones we don't need, once the first one gets there. And again, it doesn't matter how it gets through. We know with decentralized identity, we know that this is the right message. And even if it's several levels, even if it's someone, you haven't met before, who's 1 or 2 hops away on your web of trust, like a friend of a friend, if you're planning that party, then you still know it's the right person. You can validate that and look on the web of trust and say, oh, this is a friend of this friend. Oh, okay, this is someone 2 steps away from someone I directly know. But I can actually double check that. And that's the nice thing, is if you get the message and you see a name you don't recognize, you can't do this now. You're like, who is this? And you have to ask around. And with the web of trust, it'll just show you. That would be a feature you'd want built into the system. This person, this person from these several people. These 3 other people are common. And you see this again in a weak version on LinkedIn and on Facebook, where it kind of shows you who you have in common. And you could build a much stronger version of that. And that's basically what Web of Trust is. So when you see a name you don't recognize, how do I know this person? Oh, I don't know them directly, but I know them through 10 other people.
Okay. So I still don't know how it's getting sent.
You hit send and it shows up. If you don't want to get deep into the tech, you hit send and it shows up.
We are this whole episode has been deep into the tech. So what I'm trying to say is like, how is it decentralized? Is it sent directly from one device to the other? Does it go to the carrier and then the carrier forwards it down?
So that's there. If you want to get into the tech, there's things like BitTorrent, there's things like Freenet.
We only have 9 minutes left, and we have to get through Alice's day.
So the gist of it is
let's not get into the tech.
Yeah, the gist of it is that you can, because what everyone always worries about is, but wait a minute, if there's no central server, what if my device is off when someone sends me a text, right? What if Alex's device?
Exactly.
So again, because generally more than one other person, these days, a lot of people leave their devices on all the time. So if you have 30 people in common, I'll bet you one of them has their device on at a minimum. And so even without a centralized server, you can relay through mutual connections.
And then let's say I wanted some sort of it seems like there could be a service for some ultra reliable, connectivity service. And you're saying like this server, I'm going to pay a certain amount of money, per month, and this server will always be online, and my messages will be sent to them because I trust them, and then they'll be forwarded on from there whenever the other person's online.
You could. I honestly think for most people, if you look at how many connections they have on Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff, I think most people would never have to pay for a server.
No, totally.
You could.
Let's say it's a new acquaintance. You don't have you don't have any mutual, connections. This would just be a way that you would have an ultra reliable communication forwarding service or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's other stuff.
And
if you look at BitTorrent, there's a thing called tit for tat protocol, where because no one knows anyone on BitTorrent really, if I want to download a song or a movie or something, well, no one likes leechers that are just downloading all the time and not contributing to the network. So they have this whole protocol. There's entire papers on it called tit for tat. And so you're like, well, I want to download some data. And the other node's like, that's great. What are you going to give me in return? And so there is already like 10, 15 years ago, an effective protocol to make sure that data stays flowing in both directions. That if I'm downloading something, then I can push data up. And there's a lot of ways you can balance and make the network fair without even worrying about bringing billing into it. And you can have nodes do back off like Freenet does and be like, yeah, sorry, I'm busy right now. And, even when people are worried about mobile, right? You don't want to burn battery to transfer other people's messages. Okay, you can go ahead and you can say when the device is on the charger, we'll go ahead and relay messages at full speed. And we'll back off a lot and do much slower relay or messages only for people that we know within one link or whatever when the device is on battery. So there's all kinds of ways to do this. It's not actually a problem. But yeah, if you want to, you go ahead, make a service, pay the service, do something like Filecoin or whatever. I honestly don't think that's a problem. If it is, it's temporary. I think this can all work with just everyone who is using the service is also contributing bandwidth and hardware back to the service. Gotcha. So it scales very nicely.
So part of the decentralized world is that everybody's devices are creating a sort of mesh network everywhere. And they're sort of... so I guess at some other time we should probably talk about like what does an ISP even look like, in that world? Is it really just peer-to-peer everywhere? Are there still centralized ISPs? But we don't have a lot of time. If you can answer that in 1 minute.
I think I can. So the gist is in a dense city or even a less dense city, you could probably just do peer-to-peer with everyone. You need some kind of massive backhaul link between cities. So you need some big old pipe. So to go from like Phoenix to Denver is, there's areas between Phoenix and Denver where there's not a lot of anything. And definitely not, you can't like route all that traffic through like one dude's phone, right? Near four corners. That's not going to work. So there is a place you would have to have some way of doing backhaul between cities. Could be a federal thing. Cable's actually not that expensive since we're all using it. I see taxpayer funding as a pretty obvious way to just put in some big old optical pipes. So anyway, that's the gist of it.
Okay. And then maybe in rural areas, they could have something like Starlink or something like
Hmm.
that. And
Yeah.
that's how they get their connection. Okay, cool. So then, so Alice has now set up that lunch. Let's say, or I'm sorry, her partner messaged her to ask for some money for something, and she transfers some money. I'm presuming this is going to be pretty much the same as buying that coffee in the morning, right?
Yeah.
So
The other
she,
interesting wrinkle you could do is you could have certain transactions where you're both people have to agree. Maybe it's a larger purchase, maybe they were thinking about a car, and even though she's at work, her partner can go ahead and say, "Okay, this looks good to me," and just a little alert pops up on Alice's phone. Again, she knows it's actually from who she thinks it is because we have strong identity, and it says, "Oh, look, here's the price that got negotiated for the car." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, no, I'm good with that." Click. And now there's
mm,
no squabble afterwards because everyone has actually affirmatively agreed that, yep, nope, that's a good price. That's what we talked about. Just go ahead, transfer the money. Let's get the car.
okay, cool, nice. So then that's all pretty simple. That's a lot simpler than it is today. And
Yeah.
I guess are the banks still taking money out of this transaction for the
Yeah,
transfer
like I said,
between?
you could do cryptocurrency. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could just do banks, and digital signatures are far harder to forge than traditional signatures. There's
Gotcha.
no way to kind of fake it. If you can get the key, you can forge it. If you can get a quantum computer and you're using old school crypto, you can forge it. But if you're using modern crypto and you don't have the key, it's basically impossible to forge. So,
Okay. Well, let's see if we can kill these last couple of things in Alice's day. When I say kill, I just mean go over them real
yeah.
quickly. So, for example, after her lunch, she comes back and she noticed that she has a notification, and it says that a phishing email was blocked. And she didn't get it, but she did get a notification that this had happened. And she looks at her phone, and it says also that a phone call from the telemarketer was blocked.
Yeah.
How were those blocked, and how does that work with this web of trust?
Well, yeah, I don't even know if you need to show them, but yeah, if you know who you're talking to, if you have identity and a web of trust, then you can use that web of trust and you can say, look, this set of people I directly know, people in these groups that I already have keys for, just always let that through or always let that through between these hours, however you want to do it. And then you can say, so people that I don't directly know. So let's say you work at a medium to large company. Well, again, you can have key hierarchies for companies. So you can say, well, since I work, I'll use my example since I used to work at Amazon. Amazon's a pretty good sized company. And you could have Amazon have a key hierarchy where you could actually choose what level of hierarchy. And you could say, so if it's anyone below this division that I work in, then go ahead and let the call through because I probably need to take that. And then also, if it's anyone above this level management wise, on the off chance they call me, go ahead and let that call through. That, I should probably take calls from people higher than my level, but it has to be signed by Amazon's top level identity key. Or, if it's not, and someone tries to call and be like, hey, I'm from this department, you're like, no, you're not. I can see right here. Your key isn't signed by anything at Amazon. You're definitely not from Amazon, or your key you'd be somewhere in the key hierarchy. So you're not from Amazon. And that's a common thing. Or actually, one of the biggest cases, if you just ask for money, sometimes people will give it. And there was a guy, people go on LinkedIn and they'll look at who you know, and they'll look at the company org, and they'll call and be like, hey, yeah, we had a contract a few months back. You guys forgot to pay us. I just talked to, and they'll throw the CEO's name out there. He said to go ahead and pay it. And the other person's like, oh, well, if he said to pay it. And then, you get CEOs and people who are really busy will assume it was pre-vetted by the other person and just hand it off to billing. And this one guy asked for, I think, Facebook and Google, if I'm remembering this right, 2-3 years ago. He asked for $50 million from each. He got $100 million transferred into his account just by making up an invoice and knowing a few names. Now, he got caught. He did not get to run off and be, 100 millionaire. He's in prison somewhere. But there have been other people who asked for a lot less, who are more modest. And yeah, sometimes just ask for an invoice of $100,000 and they'll just pay it. They don't even know that they paid someone who never did any work. So this would be a big boon for reducing fraud because, again, you can see if the person says they're from a company, if it's your company, well, the first thing you're going to do when you start there is you're going to go ahead and make sure you have the top level signing key to be able to validate that chain. And if it's another company you have a contract with, well, again, you're going to grab that company's top level signing key. And so anyone who calls saying they're from your company or one of the companies you're working with, you won't have to do any work. You'll look at your phone, and you know how right now you already get the little scam likely things, except that says likely. This would be like, no, this person is definitely not from any company you have business with. This call is an external call. If they're saying that whatever's going on, they're full of it. They're trying to pull one over on you because none of the math checks out. The crypto does not check out. And so you could just reject all those calls outright. Or like you said, there could be a warning. Yeah. So the one other scenario we had that I'll jump into that's related is for kids. People want to protect their kids. And there's a lot of services where, supposedly it'll filter out obscene images and it'll filter out inappropriate messages. And one of the easiest ways to do that, again, not foolproof, we're not going to explore the darker facets of this, but if instead of trying to filter using machine learning, which is kind of fuzzy, doesn't always work, and trying to look for stuff that might be obscene, and what does that exactly mean? Because parents have wildly different standards. If you just say, look, my kid can talk to immediate family members that are, not immediate, cousins and, uncles and people who are a level out or two, grandma and grandpa. And this is the school they go to, and I trust their teacher. So anyone the teacher wants to introduce and any of the classmates, they can talk to these people. And then anyone else who wants to talk to my kid via their phone, via their computer, go ahead and, let me check that out. If they don't already connect to this trust graph in this way, go ahead and give me a heads up that someone who doesn't connect especially if there's no connection whatsoever, that's a pretty big red flag. Like, that's not how it works. You don't just randomly approach kids in the US in today's day and age, especially not online. That's not how it works. So having a system that can automatically say, this identity does not connect anywhere into this trust graph, therefore we're not even going to let that connection through. Or at least the parents or the guardians, need to actually review what's going on. Maybe they're making friends online and that's fine. But if there's no connection at all, it's worth some scrutiny there before you allow that connection to continue. And that's a heck of a lot more reliable, basing it on strong crypto and basing it on a web of trust of known entities. Heck of a lot stronger than, just trying to use machine learning to fill in the gaps.
Right. So this is about all as much of the day as we can go through for Alice, because we're out of time.
Yeah.
But let's just close it out and say, Alice, she finishes up her day. She approves her kid's contact request and gets home. She has all of the food preferences of her whole family, which are updated maybe, that day. Maybe some of her kids were like, hey, I like this thing now, and I like pickles
does
now.
Change.
And and so, when she goes and she searches for some recipes to cook that night, then they're automatically parsed out. They're like, these are the ones your family's gonna like. She just says, hey, order all those groceries and have them delivered. They all, show up probably via drones or something in the future. Dropped off. She cooks up this meal, and or maybe her partner cooks it up. Who knows? But then they they go to bed and live happily ever after because their sleeping data and all of this food data, the receipt from the coffee shop, the receipt from the fuel station, all of her activity on email and the text messages and everything like that, they're all under her control. They're not out there for other people to hack another company and get her purchase history and all of that stuff.
And
she gets to rest happy and safe.
And while she's going to bed there, again, the device is able to look at tomorrow's schedule. It's able to look at, what did she have caffeine late tonight? A whole bunch of other factors. Again, way less nefarious when it's your device completely under your control, not off in the cloud somewhere. And it's able to, again, for tomorrow say, oh, well, she's going to need a little more time to wake up, but the first meeting of the day is not till 10. So we're not going to set the alarm at 8. We'll set the alarm at like 8:50, and she'll have plenty of time to leisurely get up, have some breakfast, get cleaned up, and head into the office. So maybe finally we can have the dream that all the tech people had in the 80s and before. We have all the pieces. The key is just putting them together in something that actually works on behalf of the user directly on local hardware. Got more than enough processing and compute to make it happen.
So then in the words of Conan O'Brien, then it would be like the year 2000. So
wish I had a flashlight. I should have grabbed one to shine upwards.
Right. So finally, the 80s technology of the future will be here. And we will be able to actually live in a society where, maybe Alice, the last thing she did before she went to bed was just check in on some security cameras that were in her kids' room to make sure they're sleeping right. And she doesn't have to worry about anybody hacking those security cameras. She doesn't have to worry about anybody, doing anything nefarious to her or her kids' information overnight. She just goes to bed, has a good night, and gets ready for the morning tomorrow. So a day in one decentralized day in the life of Alice. So I think that sounds like a good life, honestly. Not only are there a lot of conveniences built in there, but the amount of security built in there to me is very nice. Just the I guess I don't really go to bed worrying about my financial information being stolen, but certainly if I were to wake up to some emails that say, hey, by the way, did you, your bank account's cleared out and now you're having rejected transactions. That would definitely stress me out. So
you would not want to put your bank account and routing and transit number on your personal website. But I guess there's one final advantage that if you had identity like this, since it's public key, you could go ahead and just have a kind of deposit only thing with your public key and just say, here, if you want to donate, instead of having Patreon take a cut, instead of having, Kickstarter or any of these, you could just directly put on your website, hey, if you want to contribute, here's my address. Just send dollars to this identity. And this is what I'm working on if you want to support my hobby.
Yeah.
And
nice.
Then you get all the money, all these musicians that are getting major cuts taken out by other companies and payment processors. Imagine if all that money went straight to the musician. That would be a beautiful thing.
Well, am I going to actually, do I have enough time in my expected lifespan to see this world?
I thought you were going to say, is the RIA going to hunt us down like dogs? Probably.
No, I keep on.
That is not the world they want to exist.
What's it called where you have like nostalgia for the future?
I can't remember the term.
But I'm having like future nostalgia where it's like it's a place I can't get, and I worry about how this sounds like at least 30 years worth of progress from where we're at now. And it doesn't even sound all that different from what we're doing. It's just that you've taken normal life and removed all the risk and annoyances.
Well, not all the risk.
Well, not all of it, but you've mitigated most of the risk and taken away most of the annoyances. It's more or less normal life. It's just that I don't have to worry about people stealing my identity, stealing my information, stealing my data, stealing my finances. I don't have to worry about that, and I don't have to worry about the annoyances of finding my car key, finding my login and password, pulling up my password manager. Oh man, the day I thought my password manager had been lost was a bad day.
Bad day.
So it sounds pretty good.
And I'm trying to find, because I mentioned the RAA crack, but I'm trying to find, there was a headline on Hacker News just recently about a noteworthy artist streaming like some absurd like billion songs or something, and got like 56 or 57 British pounds with what he got paid in royalties, which is just disgusting. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's like
sounds normal.
We could all have this. So the one thing we're not going to cover right now, but in the future, I actually have a talk at a security group coming up, and it's going to be on similar topics, but for a security audience of, security professionals, CISOs and whatnot. And there's a lot of research, and part of that talk is going to be a survey of the existing stuff. There's plenty of things. There's DAT, there's MadeSafe, there's IPFS. Freenet's been operational for damn near 20 years. Like, there's a whole bunch of others, I3M, plan systems, like dozens of these projects. So when you say it's 30 years off, I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm going to say I really hope you're wrong, because the technology has been under active development for 5 or 10 years, like really heavily. And even going back all the way to the late 90s, people were already playing with fully decentralized systems. There's reasons I think they didn't catch on, but there's a ton of research. The cryptography's been solid since the 80s. The system, the way to build these systems been reasonably well explored since at least the late 90s into the 2000s. So we got all the pieces. Like I said before, we just have to have the will, and we have to allow people to put them together to make this world happen. That's it. All the pieces are there.
Well, I won't be holding my breath, but I will. I will be pleasantly surprised whenever I see progress in this direction, and I will continue to tell people about how much better it could be. And I think that this conversation, though it needs to wrap up now, I do think that it has been very, very fruitful in that we have a lot to draw from in future conversations. So when people are saying, well, how's that apply to me? How would that be good for me? There's a lot of examples in this day for Alice that we could, relay this story to other people and say, hey, this is how it could be. This is how, these are the problems with how it is now. And that, I think that, maybe we just live in the era right now of just discussing this stuff. That's the best we can do, is just talking about it. So this way, hopefully the kids we talk to about this someday will grow up and they're going to be influential, CEOs or they're going to be influential, engineers, influential politicians, and they will be able to make this actually come true. And then, the good news is that at that time, maybe at the end of my life, I'll be able to use my digital identity to purchase some adult diapers. So this way I can get through another day and maybe see whatever's on the next horizon. So, all right, everyone. I think that's it for us for tonight. We do want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us. We are recording this pretty late tonight, but the idea is that we're going to be recording on Saturdays from now on live. The actual episodes are going to be released still on Sunday, on Tuesday, and on Thursday, but at 10 a.m. But we're going to be doing our recording here on Saturdays. So on behalf of everybody at Fault Tolerant Live Productions, thank you very much. The show is only possible due to the generous contributions of our subscribers and our sponsor, egx.org. If you enjoyed the show, please do consider subscribing or rating the show on Twitch, YouTube, or your favorite podcasting app. And until next time, take care, keep washing your hands, and don't break your tech if it doesn't do what you want. Have a good night.